and welcome to the Art of Being Human. I want to continue from when I left off in the last session in terms of the fears that people develop when they've lost a person who's very close to them through death. And so I'm turning once again to Dr. Joyce Brothers' books for some information that she shared about herself that I think is very relevant, and I think it could apply not only to a person who has lost a loved one, but to a person who's gotten a divorce, to a person who's lost a friend because they're moving away, or some kind of a breakup. But this is what she went through, and I think it's not unusual. It's very hard to go through life without the person that you're thinking about all the time, because when you first get into that grief mode, you are thinking about that person all the time. There's never a break. Everything relates to them. You really feel you can't live without them, but at the same time you have to live without them because they're not coming back. And so these are the fears which she had. She feared not having enough money. Now, she had a very active professional life, and she did very well with it. Now, but she had to cut back, or decided to cut back on her professional life because she wanted to be with him, because she realized he wasn't going to make it and that he was very ill, and she wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. Then after she died, she started worrying about finances because she had cut back so much, but she still was relatively active. She didn't cut off her profession completely. These are the fears that she had, and they aren't all related to finances, but finances is a big one. She feared that she wouldn't have enough money. She described staying up all night, making lists of the things she needed and what they were going to cost, the things she had to buy, and the cost, and would she be able to afford it, which really was not a relevant fear in her case. But people go through this, and she went through this as well. She was afraid she was going to lose her grandchild. She had a fear for her safety. She had a fear of doing things that her husband did do that she would now have to do because he was no longer there. There was a fear of being able to do those things. Then when the person dies, our reality is different. We develop a different reality, and we need to create a new reality. I remember when one of my friend's husbands died, and she had small children to raise. What am I going to do? She was always out. He was always there at Christmas. There were always gifts. We always went out on the eve of Christmas Eve, to go to a concert or do something. What am I going to do now? I have these children. I can't make up for what he can't be here to do. So I suggested have a pizza night. You have 3 children. They love pizza and popcorn or something like that. Bring in a movie or 2 and watch a film. You can keep them home. You can keep them safe. You can keep them doing something that they like to do. Give them what they like to eat, and just make a night of it. And then next day is Christmas, and open your gifts and do things like you used to. You know, I understand what all of this is like. My father died on the day of my grandmother's funeral. We had 2 major deaths in 3 days. And my folks, my family, didn't want to have Christmas. And I said, we've got to have Christmas, because what's going to happen is that the first holiday after the loss is the worst. And if you just kicked us down the road and you don't have a holiday, then your first holiday is going to be next Christmas, and you're going to go through this all again. Why not have it? And it's not going to be natural, but why not have it, get it out of the way, and then next year we start fresh. So that's what he did. My father died between Thanksgiving and Christmas, about 3 weeks before Christmas, and that was on the day of my grandmother's funeral. She had died 3 or 4 days before. So it really is difficult. I've had some experience with this, and I've kind of shepherded people through it. I know what it's like. But those are the fears that she had. In divorce cases where a parent is gone, the same is true. of what do you do? How do you create your new reality? You've got to have your new reality. Now, to create a reality, a new and different one, is sometimes lonely, and that's what I want to get into. You don't feel up to doing the things that you have to do to keep going, but you have to do those things, so you have to force it. It feels mechanical. It feels like it's not right, but you have to do it, so you do. And it's frightening when you have to rely on the money that you're making to live, and your husband is gone, and his salary is no longer coming in. And maybe there was some kind of money set aside in an insurance policy, but that's going to dry up after a few months. You're not going to have that. So there's a fear of being alone. There's a fear of not being able to make it. Fear of what you're going to do when everything runs out. Fear if you have to move. Fear if you have to work when you weren't working before. You were just taking care of the kids, and this was an arrangement that was all right with you, and all of this thing starts. So there's a ton of loneliness going on through all of this stuff, and you have to work with it. Now, loneliness is a terrible problem for many people. It's a worldwide problem. It is so prevalent that there are the governments in different countries that have certain departments that deal just with loneliness. How do you work with it? As I said before, the differences between depression and loneliness, I think sometimes loneliness is worse. The depression can be long-lasting, but so can loneliness. If the loneliness is short-lasting, it may be easier to handle, but there's a whole different quality about it. With a person that's lonely, they don't feel like they're connected to anything, and that's that problem. If friends move away and people don't call you, if you lose people and you yourself are ill, you're in a nursing home, let's say. I have friends of mine in nursing homes that I haven't been able to visit for various reasons, and they call and they remind me, when are you coming? I'm lonely. When are you coming? I'm lonely. So I try to pick up on that. So that's the way that it is. Now, the older people sometimes can't drive. They're disabled. Their friends slip away, or they move, or they die. Whatever happens, and you can find yourself in a very lonely situation. You can be in a big city and feel lonely because you're not connected to anybody. There's all kinds of people around you, but you're not connected to anybody. So that's a problem. Now, there is some help for that, and one of the helps is to join organizations in which you meet periodically, maybe once a week, maybe once a month. And if you meet periodically and get to meet the people that are in these organizations and talk with them, there are church organizations that are just sometimes clubs just for elderly people. And that is a help. You can get yourself a hobby and get involved with a hobby in which you're out and meeting people with that hobby. That is a help. One of the things I'm interested in, but I don't know much about it, is an electronic device that actually talks to you. It actually responds to the human voice, and you can have a conversation with it. Now, they've tested this on quite a few people, and some of these people who are elderly, they go out shopping, they do the things they have to do. What do they go home to? Nothing, except a television set. Television is a help, too. But what this one lady was talking about, what people have been talking about, is this electronic device. You get into the house. I don't know what it looks like. I would really love to see it. And it starts, you can talk to it. And you can have a conversation with it, and it will talk back. And that device has been a big help to many lonely people, especially elderly people. They feel like they're going home to something. They feel like there's going to be something there that will respond to them. And it does. It responds to the human voice. It recognizes the human voice. It has a vocabulary, and it can talk to you, Artificial intelligence, and that's where maybe it comes from. So that is one of the things that's a help. There are all kinds of other things that are a help too. Just getting out, getting involved with people. Now, there are some people that are naturally loners, and there's nothing wrong with being a loner, but you would be better off if you do have some kind of a person or club or group of people that you can go to. You have lunch out with them every so often. Maybe you bake cookies and you go to a nursing home and you visit people in nursing homes or in hospitals, or you have a pet, so you go out and you walk your pet. A lot of people spend a lot of time walking their pets. Their pets need it, they need it, it gets them out. That's a help too. You know, so it's a battle. It's really a battle within yourself to decide that you're not going to just get sucked into feeling lonely and sit there and do nothing all day except commiserate with yourself as to how lonely you are. You know, I was a college professor for a few years, and I'm not a lonely person, but I used to get lonely on weekends. And the reason I got lonely on weekends is that the kids weren't there. I wasn't teaching. I was doing research or whatever I was doing, but there was no staff meetings that I had to go to. And so sometimes I'd go to the college, and I would have to work on classes or this or that or the other. But I was lonely without people. I was lonely without the students there. I was lonely without interacting with the staff members. And so if I had something to do, something to get me out, then I didn't have any loneliness. And during the week, I didn't have any anyway, because the school was loaded with students and staff members, and we would get together and we would have lunch together. And it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being a college professor. But you've got to realize that if you have a break from it and there's nobody around, suddenly you realize that you're alone. And when you realize that you're alone, you just don't feel connected to anything. So I think the key to getting over loneliness is to feel connected somehow. So how do you feel connected? Well, you feel connected if you can be with a person, and it doesn't have to be all day, to be with them for part of the day, to go out to lunch with somebody. You know, I can remember, I'm not from this area, but I am from the state. And I can remember I woke up one day and I was full of energy and I didn't have anything I had to do. So I called a friend of mine who's living in another part of the state. It was like a 3-hour drive to get there. And I says, you know what? I'm just sitting here bored to death. She says, come down here and we'll go to lunch. I says, that sounds good. I drove 3 hours to get to her so that we could do lunch together in one of our favorite restaurants, and then go to a store and maybe pick something out or at least see what they were selling, and then 3 hours back, and I was fine. I wasn't lonely during the drive. Why? Because I'm paying attention to the road and what I have to do, or listening to the radio as well. But the thing is, I was doing something. The whole key is to do something. It'll take your mind off the loneliness, and then you can get together with your friends, and then you can do something else, you know, that just kind of takes it away. And even I think sometimes watching a favorite television program will sometimes help to take it away. Or I know I have friends that watch games. I'm not so much of a sports fan. But then they'll call each other, what do you think of that play? What do you think of that thing that they did? And that call by the umpire and all of that. It keeps you active enough so that your brain doesn't get into a mode. This is, I'm lonely, I'm all alone, I have no connection. But that's what it feels like to be alone. And if you can just get yourself out of it, to force yourself to do something, just do something, and then connect with somebody if you can. You know, I think that's probably a key to getting rid of the loneliness. I think it's harder to manage than depression, but I think that you can do it. And if you're lonely, make an effort to be somewhere, to do something, maybe to watch a movie, to get your mind off that loneliness, because it feeds on itself. I feel terrible, I feel lonely. And if you don't do something to break it, it's going to continue because it's going to feed on itself. And so what you need to do is to get active in something. If you have a hobby, great. If you are planning to do some activity, that's great. And if you just get out, this is a good day to go out to lunch, and then to go through a store. maybe buy something. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be something. It'll get you out of that loneliness. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of loneliness in a person who has just lost a loved one, because they go back to nothing. They go back to nobody being in the house. But if they have pets, if they have a friend they can call, if they can go out, if they can meet somebody, it's really the key. I think the key to health, when you go through a divorce or go through where a spouse dies, the key to health is to have a contact that you can talk to. There are grief groups that meet that are a help. You know, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous. You always have somebody that you can call. You always have a meeting that you can go to. These things need to spring up to help people out of that loneliness, because it is a terrible thing to have to go through. Now, for the most part, small groups, joining groups, having a contact, going out for just to have a lunch or something like that, it's all very important, and it's all a help, but you have to do that. Now, for Dr. Joyce Brothers, with Dr. Joyce Brothers, she started writing a book on what it's like to be a widow. It's been described as one of her best books, one of her best things, because what she realized was that it was cathartic for her. You know, she got it, all of her fears she documented. All of the things that she was afraid of, she documented. All of the time she just dissolved into tears, she documented. She spent a year and a half, she said, crying. She spent a year and a half being absolutely lonely, feeling terrible, without her partner. And then she developed all these fears. How am I going to make it? How am I going to make it alone? You know, she thought, well, she's well known. She can have all kinds of conferences that will want her to speak and all of that. There's plenty that she could do, but she had to overcome the inertia to do it. And so what happened was she started writing that book. And as she started writing the book, she realized that she was becoming a whole person again. She wasn't wallowing in the loneliness. She had a year and a half of absolute horror in terms of depression and anger and all of the things that you go through when you've lost a loved one. And it does last. It can last that long. When she put it down on paper and she started to write, she started feeling that she was like another person, like she was a whole person, and that was important to her. She wrote a book, and the book is a very good book. And then she felt like she was getting a hold of her reality. She was going to be a new person. And now that the book is written, she's gone back to her professional life, she feels fine. She says there are times when she still has moments of sadness that may not leave her for a while, but most of the time she feels fine. Her energy has come back. Her professional career is very active as it was before. Now, the book that I read, you have to remember, is about 30 years old, so I really don't know what she's doing now. I haven't heard anything in terms of what she's doing now. But 30 years ago, this is how she describes her coming back to reality. She realized when she was writing the book she was feeling better. And she would interview people who were going through grief, and she would find out what they were going through and find out how they planned to recover and how that recovery was. She found out some very interesting things. For example, men who lose their wives want to marry again. They usually come to a point where they want to marry again, and they want to marry a woman who is like 10 years their junior, you know, a younger person. Then if they get sick, then someone's there to help them through that. But women have a different take on it. Once they find that they can be independent, they can make their own choices, and no one's hounding them to do this, that, or the other, then they feel good. They start to feel appreciated. They start to feel that they are glad that I'm not glad that they're single because of the reason, but they're glad that they're gaining and they can live a single life and be happy with it. And most of them don't want to get married again. And the reason they don't want to get married again is that even though they had an intense and very blessed time sometimes in taking care of the person that died, their husbands, they don't want to go through it again. They like being independent. They like having their freedom. They like making their own choices. And the thought of marrying somebody is an okay thought, but at the same time, what are they going to lose? Is their husband's going to get sick and they're going to have to go through all of that trauma of taking care of another person and losing another person, going through all of those horrible emotions that they did before. They don't want to do that. So most women who can find it in themselves to create and write or do whatever they have to get rid of all of the horrible emotions they're suffering and rebuild a life, then they feel fine with it and they don't feel weak. And they develop a lifestyle that's for a single person, and they're fine with it, and they don't want to get married again. They're afraid of going through all of those things again, and they don't want to do it. However, men do want to get married again because they want to have a partner, and if something goes wrong, in terms of their health, they have somebody to lean on to bring them through. So it is possible to get rid of grief, to get rid of loneliness, and to be your own person, and even if you're a single person. And if you decide to get married, that's fine. But if you decide not to get married, that's fine too. It's what you want to do. And when you get that sense of who you are as an individual, you're not defining yourself according to what your relationship to another person is. You're defining your relationship as to who you are personally. Then you can come and make a decision. Yeah, maybe I would like to get married again. I miss this, that, and the other. Well, maybe I don't want to get married again. I'm doing fine as I am, and I don't want to risk losing what I've got now to having a repeat of some of the trauma that I had to live through before. It's just a personal decision. But women all over the world who are now widows have to go through that process of defining themselves differently, defining themselves as single again, unless they do decide to get married. And searching for a husband is not going to be the answer to a lot of their problems. Most women who lose their husbands because they die and they become widows, most of them are about 56 years old when that happens. And to find another partner that you think would be like your first partner when you're 56 years old or close to being 60 years old, it doesn't happen very much. You are constantly comparing the person that you might be married to with the husband that you lost, or vice versa, and that gets to be problematic. I know my mother decided she would never marry again. She couldn't find anyone that was better than my father, so therefore, why even try? And there are numerous women that feel the same way. You're going to do a comparison game. I'm going out with somebody and maybe we'll get married, but I don't know if I want to because that person is not like the person I lost. And you try to compare them. No two people are alike, so it doesn't always work out. So, but you can live through it, and you can be a person in your own right and develop your own life. And that's an important thing to remember. If you're in a situation where you've lost somebody and you feel alone and you feel you'll never get back to normal again, it takes time, sometimes it takes months, but you can get back to a new normal that can be just as healthy as the other normal was when your husband was alive or your wife was alive or you were connected in some way to a person that was meaningful to you. And if the relationship stopped, it doesn't mean you have to stop growing and just kind of hover in your grief. There are ways to get out of it. So we're about out of time. I'm going to close it here, and we'll continue with the study of becoming free from depression and guilt. We're still dealing with that, and I'll deal with that, and we'll do this. We'll continue with this next time. So please join me then.